Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're going to be talking about wall launchers. A great detailed explanation to how they work, the bugs associated with them, and the different perks that you can use and how they work. As well, at the end of the video, I'll give you my recommendations on what perks you should be using. So first, let's talk about a bit of general information about wall launchers. Now, wall launchers are very useful for moving husks from one location into another reliably. Now, there's only two other traps in the game which can do that, which is going to be the floor launchers for non-smasher units and wall lights for the smasher units. But what's really amazing about wall launchers is that they work for all units, right? Whether it's a smasher or not. So that's why wall launchers, in my opinion, are probably one of the most useful traps in the game when it comes to that. Now, suppose I am a husk and I'm going to be walking over this wall launcher over here, right? So I'm going to be walking along, and based on the amount of knockback that this wall launcher has, I'm going to launch a certain distance, right? And all the references for the amount of knockback perks that you have on your wall launchers, gold legendary perks, will be in the description below, right? I have a reference sheet for all those values, right? And the lines representing them will be the lengths of those distances. So you can take a look at that at your own time, right? So based on the amount of impact this wall launcher has, I'm going to be launched a certain distance, right? And once I get launched, I'm going to be launched off this platform, and then I'll have to walk all the way around to go back to that wall launcher, right? So that's pretty much a general idea how you can use it. However, you can also instead use something like this, which you can add additional traps over here, right? Which then your wall launchers, what ends up doing is that it can expand your tunneling system completely, right? Or they can launch them into here, or it can launch them into here, right? So if it wasn't for this wall launcher, you would have to just have pretty much a straight line over here or wherever the husks are going to be pathing, right? So there's a lot more limitation when you are not using traps that are moving husk away, right? Now, another thing to say is that suppose I am a smasher, right? Suppose I am a smasher unit over here, stomp, 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 and then met by the wall launcher over here. So instead of launching husks, it would stagger the husk, right? So it would stagger the smasher over here, and it would actually move them 0.5 tiles over, right? And it seems to be always 0.5 tiles for the staggering distance, right? And the staggering, what ends up doing is that it would stun the smasher, right? It would stun it in place, but it would actually move it as well at the same time as stunning it. But it's a very small move, and it's about 0.5 tiles. However, if you are, let's say, using low half walls like these, and a smasher is walking along here, and then that stagger distance would let them go to the next tile, which could possibly making them fall over here, right? Or it could stagger them into the next tile over here, which then you can also have some useful traps on this side over here, right? Which can also activate these traps, and that would also do damage here, right? So there are some uses when it comes to staggering the smashers, right? And I take advantage of this in my Twine Endurance builds quite a bit, if you saw my previous videos on that. Now, each wall launcher itself is going to have a different knockback and impact value. So one thing we're going to talk about is the impact value, right? So there's various stats over here which I'll discuss, right? But for now, I'm going to talk about the impact value. So this is a wall launcher without any impact or knockback rolls. And the impact on here is 15,977, right? And this impact value is going to be the true value of this wall launcher, right? And then each husk associated with it is going to have a certain impact guard that you need to break before they can actually get launched, right? And most husks are pretty weak where you don't have to worry about it too much, but smasher units have a very massive impact threshold, right? So Diezen has done a linear interpolation with his data set, and his linear interpolation for smasher units is going to be approximately 181 multiplied by the smasher power level. And that's usually the general formula I use when I try to calculate the impact guard of smashers, right, based on their power level. Now, you can use that to your advantage when you're talking about the impact values. However, for all the other rolls, whether you have 3 times impact, whether you have 4 times impact, 2 times impact, the impact value here is false, and this is a bug which should be fixed, right? So this impact value over here, what it ends up doing is that it's actually taking this value being multiplied and multiplying it twice, right? So suppose that we have, let's say, 3 times impact. I'll get out the silly calculator, right? Suppose we have 3 times impact, so I'm going to start with the base value over here, 15,977, right? And this is the base value for no impact. And then we do the 3 times impact over here, right? 3 times impact over there, which then I will calculate that to be multiply 1.45 over here, right? And this over here is going to be the true value, right? It's going to be the true value of the wall launcher for the impact. However, this is not matching with the description in here, which is 33,591, right? And how this value is being calculated is that it's actually multiplying it again, right? Multiplying it again, and then it would get that true value over here, as you see, right? And this is a bug, and this should be fixed. And this is also notable with floor launchers too, right? Floor launchers having a super massive impact, and this is also a bug too, which is actually being applied excuse me, which it seems like it's being applied a 4th time somehow, which is kind of crazy. Actually no, I think it's being multiplied twice. But yeah, that's, again, floor launchers will be a different video, right? I'm going to be discussing about wall launchers. Now, so that's the impact display bug, right? And this bug should be fixed in the future, hopefully. Well, hopefully. All right. There is a hidden stat with all traps called a trigger delay, right? So this trigger delay is the delay for which, when they're in range of the wall launcher or whatever trap is being placed, when they're in range, and then they will activate after a certain period, right? And for wall launchers, it's going to be 1 second. So there's a 1 second trigger delay for wall launchers, right? And that 1 second trigger delay, right, is going to be different for various traps. So wooden floor spikes trigger delay is 0. So when you place a wooden floor spike, it will always activate instantly, right, as soon as the husk lands on it, right? It would instantly slow them. And then they have a reload timer of 1 second over here as of the recent patch. Now, another thing to note as well, right, is that for example, wall lights over here have a arming delay 1 second, as pretty much all traps do, I think. However, their trigger delay for wall lights is just like wooden floor spikes at 0, right? It would instantly activate as soon as husks land on it, which is also the same thing for wall dynamos, right? So these are things that you can keep in mind when you're thinking about what arming delay means. It's not the trigger delay, right? Arming delay is pretty much a stat that can be ignored, and it's not really that important in my opinion. Now we're going to talk about something else, right, which is also a bug associated with the excuse me. Now it's going to be a bug associated with impact, right? So we see impact values over here, right? You see impact values over here on the wall launchers, which is all fine and dandy, right? And then these are not true, which I just explained, right? And there's going to be a true impact value for them, right? Now, another thing to note too is that when husks are overlapping, right? So if their hitboxes are overlapping against each other, right? And it gets hit by a wall launcher or wall light, or I think perhaps floor launchers too, right? Is that what ends up happening, their impact value doubles, right? So if 2 husks overlap, right, and they get hit by the same trap which does impact, the impact gets activated twice for each husk, right? And this is really, really important because this potentially multiplies your impact values drastically, right? Whether you have 0 impact, it would just multiply this by twice, and boom, that's a massive impact spike, right? And this is really useful for husks that are fat, which have larger hitboxes, and that's associated generally with smashers, right? Laser boys. I think even husky husks, right? Even husky husks have a little bit fatter hitbox than the others, just a little bit. And this is really important because you can actually get away with a less impact values for the beginning of your tunnels, right? So over here I have 0 impact, and I often use 0 impact for the beginning of my tunnels because the impact values for these don't really matter, because at the beginning of the tunnels the density of husks are very high, so the chances of them being overlaps is very high. Okay, and then towards the end of my tunnels, and then I would generally use lower durability wall launchers and higher impact wall launchers, right? Whereas the front here, I'll just use low impact, low knockback, and high durability, right? So that's generally how I would design my tunnels for something like Twine Endurance, right? All right, and now we're going to talk about some of the information that's already on my spreadsheet and my reference sheet, right? And on the spreadsheet, what I have is the activation area and the launch area. And I think this is something really important to talk about. So what I've marked over here is the activation area. So if a skinny husk is in this activation zone, they will activate the wall launcher, and after 1 full second, they will activate the launcher and it will trigger launch, right? So after 1 full second, it will trigger the wall launcher and they'll get launched as soon as they're in this activation zone, right? And in order for them to be in the activation zone, at least one part of their hitbox has to be in that area, right? So if it's a smasher, then they could be pretty much on the edge over here and they'll still activate it because their hitbox is going to overlap it. However, it's a little husk, and the little husk has to actually be in that zone, right? So a little midget has to actually be in that zone over here to actually activate this wall launcher. Then after 1 full second, it will trigger and it will launch them, right? Or stagger. So yes, this is the activation area. Now, however, the activation area is not the same as the launch area, right? So the launch area is the area for which the husk can actually get launched from, right? So that launch area is going to be over here, over here, over here, and finally over here. All right, so the launch area actually takes up pretty much the entire tile except for the outer edge over here. Alright, so if a little husk is in this position, they will actually get launched from the wall launcher, but however, they won't trigger the wall launcher. So to trigger the wall launcher, they need to be a little bit closer to the middle, and then the wall launcher can trigger. Alright, or they can be triggered from another husk that's also in the middle too. That can also work. So that's something really interesting as well, is that if a skinny husk is on the edge of this tile over here, this wall launcher will activate, but it will not launch the husk, right? So that's something pretty interesting to note about the difference between this activation area and the launch area, right? Now, if this was a floor launcher, right? So if this was a floor launcher over here, right? This floor launcher would take up the entire area. So whether it's the activation area, whether if it's the launch area, it takes up the entire tile. That's one thing really interesting about floor launchers, but we will discuss floor launchers in another video. Okay, now as well, depending on the amount of knockback that the wall launcher has, they will launch a certain distance, right? And I showcase this in my my spreadsheet and as well in my reference sheet for a visual representation. However, I can also go over that in this video over here. Alright, so suppose a husk is going to be in this position over here, right? A regular husk, not a husky husk, just a regular small husk. And they are going to be launched from a 0 impact wall launcher. What they're end up going to do is going to end up 1 full tile and then 1/16 of a tile over here. So they're going to end up launching into this position over here. Now, depending on the movement speed of the husk, right? So suppose a husk is going full speed over here, right? Or a husk is just walking along slowed, right, from a wooden floor spike. They're going to actually end up in a slightly different position than what's going to be on my reference sheet. My reference sheet is actually showing values when they're standing still. However, if they're moving, they're actually going to be slightly different, right? Going to be slightly different. So instead of landing over here, they might actually end up in this position over here because they have some momentum from their own movement, right? They have some momentum from their own movement, which carries on into the wall launch, right? So that's something to keep in mind when you're doing wall launching, right? Because sometimes, for example, let's say if you had a wall launcher over here, let's say, and I'm just gonna do another 0 impact over here. So suppose a husk is on here, right? And they get launched from this position where I'm standing, right? So this position from where I'm standing, it's still a valid position, right? Actually, no, this position, right? So this position over here is a valid position for the wall launcher to launch me. And when I get launched, right, and I'm already moving towards the south side over here, and then I might end up landing on this tile, right, instead of down here, right? It depends on the momentum of the husk that they already have, right? So that's also something to keep in mind about husk momentum from their own movement would also carry on to the wall launch itself. However, it's not really too big, but it can make a difference in some cases. All right. Now, so this is the example for this wall launch over here with the regular husk, right? And they end up 1 1/16 of a tile. So that means it doesn't really matter if they're, say, in this position over here, right? There's in this position over here, they will still end up getting launched the exact same length over here. So where they are doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter for the length, right? The length is always fixed no matter what. Right, so in the 1 times impact case, right? So let's say I'm a husky husk, right? I am a husky husk, and this is 1 times impact, and I am gonna be, let's say, actually I need to place this tile this way. So I'm gonna be in this position over here, a husky husk, and I'm gonna get launched a certain distance. So for 1 times impact, that's gonna be 1.5 tiles over, which is gonna land right in this position over here, right? So they're gonna land in this position over here. However, the husky husk and right husk do a roll animation. So in this roll animation for wall launchers is gonna be 0.25 tiles, which is a 1/4 tile. So the roll animation will actually land them up right into here, right, for the husky husk, right? And husky husks in general, they are launched a little bit further than the regular husks, right? And kind of interesting that they do, because I would think that they wouldn't be, because they're fatter. But you know, Fortnite physics. And you can view all the other launches into my reference sheet over here, right? So if you want to look at the details of each individual wall launch, whether it be a regular husk, a riot husk, a Huskling, you can look at that information in there. Now, one thing to talk about Husklings are that they are bugged. They are bugged as hell, right? So Husklings, if you don't interact with them at all, right? So if you don't interact with the Huskling at all, they seem to be relatively okay for their wall launching. However, if you start interacting with them, it seems like they go buggy and they start launching either extremely far distances or they don't launch very far at all. Right, so it seems really weird exactly how the little Husklings work, right? I don't know what's the reasoning behind it, but to me it is a bug that they launch at so far distances that don't make sense, right? Or they just launch extremely little distances that don't make sense at all either, right? And so again, if you want to look at the different values of the launches, go to my reference sheet or my spreadsheet. All right. Now, another thing to note as well is my recommendations on the perks for your wall launchers, right? So if you only had to choose one wall launcher, you only had one wall launcher and you want to perk it up, in my opinion, that particular wall launcher should be 3 times impact, double reload, right? In my opinion, it should be the 3 times impact and double reloader over here, right? This is my recommendation if you only had one wall launcher to level up, right? Now, the only downside of this wall launcher is that it doesn't give you a lot of durability. Now, it says 80 over here because I have max trap durability, right? But if you don't have max trap durability, your values are probably going to end up in like 30 or something, right? Something really low. Alright, but if you only had one wall launcher, this would probably be the wall launcher to get, right? It is the most versatile, in my opinion, right? Now, another option too, as well, is to get this one, right? So this is another really great option as well, 4 times impact, single reload, right? And the reason why I say that's a great option is because the adding another reload doesn't really do too much, in my opinion. right? Because if you look at this reload over here, 3 times impact, the reload speed is 4.3 seconds. However, each wall launcher, no matter what the reload is always going to have a 1 second trigger delay, right? So the reload timer is actually technically going to be 5.3 in a sense, right? Whereas the wall launcher over here, 5.6 for a single reload is going to have a 6.6, and 5.3 versus 6.6, the difference in those is only 1.3 seconds, and that's not really that big of a deal in my opinion, considering those timers over there, right? So this is also a really great option for that, right? And it would also launch Husk even further, which could more likely get them into the third tile, right? Which again, you can look at the information on my reference sheet over there. So in my opinion, this is also a really amazing option for that, right? It is the 4 times impact single reload wall launcher. But however, in my opinion, I'd still probably go for this over here, and this is more so because of the floor launcher, right, which I'll recommend, which is going to be 4 times impact single reload over here. And that's actually the main reason why I'm going to recommend the 3 times impact, so that you can use it with the single reload floor launcher, and the reloads would match over there. But I will discuss this into another video. Alright, and suppose if you had a second wall launcher to level, my recommendation is going to be 0 impact wall launchers, right? Either the single reloaders over here, right, with 5 times durability, or the double reloads over here, 4 times durability. And the reason why I'm recommending this is because in many cases you don't need Husk to be launched very far, right? There is a lot of cases you'd be surprised about, you don't need to launch Husk far at all, and the impact values don't really matter either, right? So in that case, the most optimal solution is to just not use any impact rolls and go for straight durability, which is going to be a lot more user friendly for people who don't have really high trap durability and want to do missions which are very long, such as twine endurance, candy endurance, or etc., right? So this is actually, in my opinion, my second most recommended wall launcher to get, is to get an extremely high durability wall launcher with no impact whatsoever, with a minimum of 1 reload speed, right? And this is going to help you a lot with durability and not having to replace traps so much in extremely long missions, right? Alright, so that is my second recommendation for wall launchers if you're going to level up a second wall launcher. Okay? And my third recommendation for a wall launcher to level up, in my opinion, is going to be this wall launcher over here, which is going to be the 4 times impact single reload wall launcher, right? Assuming that you already picked this one, right? So this is going to be my third recommendation for the wall launcher, because that extra tile distance can be very useful in many situations, right? And that extra tile distance is actually a lot more reliable when you're doing these half flow walls over here, right? So if you're doing these half flow walls, and this is a 4 times impact wall launcher, in pretty much every case it's going to launch Husk into this tile over here, right where I'm standing, right? This tile over here. Right, and this is actually could be game changing for many situations when it comes to terrain, right? So this is why I recommend a 4 times impact wall launcher, because it can be launched in this tile where I'm standing, and very reliably when you're using these low half walls over here. Okay, my fourth recommendation for wall launchers, right, is going to be either the 2 times impact. Is either going to be the 2 times impact wall launcher over here with extra durability and single reload, just for a little bit more durability and the reliability of launching tiles into the second tile over here. So if you only need to launch Husk into the second tile over here in a very reliable manner, then that is one great option to do so. That is one really great option to do so while still having some extra durability, right? However, if you feel like you don't really need a trap with extra durability for that purpose, then my fourth recommendation for a wall launcher is going to be 5 times impact, right? 5 times impact. And in many cases, the 5 times impact can be very useful, because it would always launch Husk into this 4th tile set over here without needing to use the low half walls, right? So before I was using the low half walls for the 4 times impact, right, which would work. However, if you're not using those, goes, the 5 times impact would always launch them into this tile over here. The main downside about using the 5 times impact wall launcher is, of course, there is no reload on them. There is no reload on them, so they're very, very slow. But however, in my opinion, they still have very many uses. For example, in the end of the tunnels where the density is going to be very low, right? Now, if you're going to level up a 5th wall launcher over here, then it would be the other one that I recommend, right? Which is either this one, right? The 2 times impact over here with the extra reload, or the 5 times impact over here. For a 6th wall launcher, in my opinion, it's going to be the other one of this wall launcher set over here, right? Either the double reloaders, 0 impact, or the single reloaders over here, the other set of that, right? And the reason why I say that is because sometimes I want a little bit faster reload, right? Just for a little bit more optimization, but I still want to have higher durabilities too, right? Or this one over here is going to have more higher durability, a little bit slightly less reload, and resulting in an extremely durable launcher over here, right? So either one of those is okay, right? Now, the ones that I don't recommend from my testing is going to be this one. This wall launcher over here with single impact, from my testing, they doesn't do anything more than the 0 impact over here, and it doesn't do anything more than the double impact over here. So single impact, in my opinion, for my testing, seems kind of useless, right? So you don't really need to go for any one-time single impact over here, right? For my testing, this seems to be useless. Okay. And this is also another recommendation if you are looking to level up a 6th wall launcher over here, is one with healing. Now the healing is actually very useful because sometimes in missions like Twine Endurance or Candy Endurance, which are extensively very long, and there's certain husks that want to beat on a wall because they're assassin husks, they're targeting you, and you just want to heal up the wall a little bit over a long period of time. And a healing wall launcher can be very useful for that over here, right? Now you don't need to use 3 times impact double reloaders. I think the perks on them don't really matter too much in my opinion, right? So you can use whatever perks you want, but the healing is going to be very important in my opinion for certain situations which the husks beat on frequently, but you don't want to actually heal it yourself. All right. So this is also another recommendation for a 6th wall launcher over here, or a 7th if you wish, right? Which I guess people are only have to be crazy like me to have so many wall launchers, right? But yeah. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching my little wall launcher video. Little details here and there. So I hope you learned something from this video, alright? And whether you're a new player just learning about the game, or you're an endgame player wanting to take things a little bit further. Alright? And my next video I think I'm going to do related to the Valley amplifier over here, which you can see is naked, right? I've been experimenting with some things here and there, and actually you can make a Valley build being focused on damage, right? Which is very surprising considering this is the UFO and Mist Pod Wave, which has tons of smashers, but you can actually make a really good damage build for them, right? Or you can use the cheesy strategy, right? So I'm gonna do both of them as well, right? But yes, take care everybody, and as always, have fun building.